Laurits, thank you for joining in the podcast. I'm looking forward to interview you, get to know a little bit about your story and what drives you. You're a passionate man, so I'm excited to ask you some questions and maybe poke in and get an understanding of how you live your life and how you execute business and how you, with Nordic Alpha Partners, actually help to work with other companies that are in the scale-up process. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself and what NAP does exactly.
Yeah, so Laurits Sørensen, I'm one of the founders of Nordic Alpha Partners. We are today 3 senior partners, Troels Øberg and Rasmus Lund and myself. We were established in 2017. We call ourselves an economic sustainability fund in the growth phase. So that is growth equity. And maybe just to clarify for people who doesn't fully understand the private equity value chain, you have your seed investors, then you have your venture investors, then you have your growth investors, and then you have your buyout investors. You could really say that's kind of the value chain. And we come in when you have taken the tech risk off, and these companies need to go into global scaling. We're completely committed to GreenTech, which means that our mandate, our focus, our specialism is really focused on taking out and spotting tomorrow's GreenTech leaders and really scaling that into a global scale, typically from local to global players.
What about GreenTech really inspired you? I mean, you have a bit of a prolific career. You had your own companies in the past, right? So I'd love to hear your journey with coming to this.
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. In my early days, I did a lot of startups in the nightlife. Some nightclubbing and techno raves and all kinds of things.
Really?
In my young years, I think it was the first one that summoned 1,000 people into those environments and in the early days. So, but of course, moving in my more professional career, my dad was in IT and he helped me into the IT sector. And it was during those days that I started to realize that when you're really in highly dynamic environments, there are certain theories that are missing. And building on those things, I later in my career decided that I really wanted not be in a corporate setting. I really want to pursue where you had these dynamics that I believe these theories could address. And within that, it was absolutely clear that one of the more challenging environments was really the GreenTech transformation.
Challenging?
Challenging for sure.
How come?
Well, I think if you look at it when it comes to GreenTech, I think everybody's talking about the GreenTech value of death and on the elements of actually scaling GreenTech. If you look at it, it's actually quite logical why GreenTech is so complex. If you look at, and from the internal side, GreenTech is always Hardtech. Very often in combination with software, but there's very few software GreenTech companies. And when you talk GreenTech, you talk Hardtech. When you talk Hardtech, way more complex. Heavy value change, heavy on working capital, the TRL, so really the complexity of bringing products to market is way slower, requires regulatory infrastructure, certification, support, all these elements. So really the pure dynamic of GreenTech and the complexity of scaling that is way higher. The other thing is GreenTech is a transformation. So if you look at it, it's technology that is coming out that needs to change how we're working. And that actually impacts the world in 2 ways that is very complex. On one side, it's transformation. So it's technology transformation. So it's new ways of working with energy. It's recycling. It is new ways, new technologies that are coming into market. That makes it tech transformation. But on the other side, it's also disruption. Because essentially, if you look at all the new GreenTech technologies that are coming out, let's say recycling, well, it is disrupting waste management, which means you need to change the dynamics of the value chain. That is very complex. And then finally, these are small companies need to scale into global winners. That means they need to go to hypergrowth. And that is ultra complex. When you go to hypergrowth, really growing, it's defined by World Economic Forum as 40% growth every year, which means you're doubling the size of your business every other year. Doing that, and what that means for investing into organizations, into the cost of expansion, the complexity of cultural transformation is extreme. So the GreenTech value of death is because of these 4 things happen at the same time. And any company that has to be exposed to any of these 4 factors is very difficult to manage.
Yeah.
But with GreenTech, it's all four at the same time.
Describe Valley of Death for anyone who doesn't understand.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about why there are so many GreenTech companies that are dying. You just look at them. There's a big talk about the first and second cycle of the GreenTech wave, and more or less nobody survived the first GreenTech wave, and that actually created this, or coined out this this definition of the GreenTech Valley of Death. You can say that is really the value you need to go through in order for you to be an established company. And again, just with what I shared before, the GreenTech value of death is really these four things you need to deal with. So you need to successfully go to the other side. When you then look at the financial ecosystem, so really, if you look through the last 30, 40 years, you virtually have no technology transformer on the planet that wasn't fueled by private equity. All the big transformation were driven by private equity. But if you look at the risk reward, going into dealing with this complexity of these four things, actually the conventional private equity model is struggling to drive big returns, which means that the pure appetite to actually invest in this and actually bring the capital is not there, especially in the growth phase where we're specialized, which means you actually, even though it's so important, even though there's so much money floating into this globally, actually the ecosystem is not there. You don't see many, if any, buyout funds that are completely Article 9. Why is this? Because in order for them to do that, you need to bring Article 9 companies to the growth phase. And there are virtually no growth funds dedicated to doing GreenTech investment globally.
So you talked about taking them into the growth phase. You had a passion for seeing this area, obviously sustainability. You have a pretty different, I think, a career leap, as I understand it. Why would you actually take that career leap in the first place? Like, why was sustainability something that was passionate for you first?
But I never pursued sustainability.
Okay.
I pursued the challenge, the complexity of that industry.
Okay. Yeah.
So you could say just a little more of my career. So I came to HP, and very, very fast, I was part of a spin out of HP, established the Danish entity, was the first managing director of that entity, professionalized that, then moved to Europe because I could see that we needed to scale to a completely different level and had to centralize these things. So I went down, worked 5 years in Grenoble in France, really centralizing and establishing the enterprise business. So sell into the top 5,000 accounts in Africa, Europe, and Middle East, and really leading that effort. And this grew incredibly fast. Many of the models that we use in Nordic Alpha today was designed over that period of time because we grew insanely fast. My business alone was from establishment to $250 million of revenue. It took very few years.
Yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit before you go into continue, just those models? I'd love for you to just mention a few of them before we continue on.
Yeah. And again, we talked about it. I'm going to come out with a book. And that's actually tied down with the 4 career steps I had prior to establishing Nordic Alpha Partners with Rasmus and Troels.
Yeah.
And all those theories were developed because I put myself in a position where I couldn't find theory in order for me to support the challenge that I had. So when it was called HP Network, it was the networking business. We hired people in the team, the virtual team I was managing in 27 countries, and we're growing enormously fast. We're pouring a lot of money into this. I needed a way of actually being able to project my investments. Being a young leader at that time, I was in a way too big job versus my age, and I really, really didn't want to fail, and I was probably always going to get fired if I did.
What did that force you to do? Because you were beyond your scope of capabilities. What did that do for you?
Well, the thing is, and I always push young people to at the young age, it's incredible what people can do before they're 35. The pure capacity of their brain, the naive belief in themselves.
So blind stupidity is
exactly,
a strength.
It's perfect.
It's good.
and at a young age, I had a lot of self-confidence, and then I got myself into this job because I was pushy, and then realizing that I completely wasn't equipped to do this. So on one side, I was struggling seriously just understanding the seniority elements around it because I was very young age. The people I was working with were way older than me, politically savvy and understanding these dynamics.
Did they? So they were able to exert a little bit of power
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot. In retrospect, I can see I did many mistakes during those period of time, but we were doing so well. And I think to a large extent, the enthusiasm that and the belief that I've had in my things really provided a lot of flexibility from these senior people around me saying, okay, he really believes himself and he's delivering good results.
So pure belief was something that opened doors for you.
Oh, absolutely. But also being super methodic, strong communicator, strong results at a very young age. And I think that gave me both flexibilities and trust from these people, but also it opened up some doors where they put me in situations where I probably should have been. If you should probably choose more senior people. And coming into this, I realized the situations I put myself in within these roles, and I said, "Damn, I need to succeed now." And immediately, I have a master's degree from Copenhagen. Looked at all my theories and said, "Damn, it's not going to help me." And then I read all the books, Crossing the Chasm, and all these books, and I said, "No, they're great theories, but they won't help me operationally." So I started building my own ecosystem on how to actually start to understand the fundamental logics of hypergrowth and how to manage this. And I wanted to find the formulas underneath it. So I wanted to be mathematic. I wanted to be able to do this data-driven, while at the same time wanted to simplify reality so I can enable my team and people around me to see the same logics that I was seeing, and then putting this into math. So again, at my HP period of time, that's where the fundamental formula was developed, which I call the growth formula. Essentially, all growth on the planet is defined by two things: frequency times conversion. So any business on the planet is how many times do you shoot, to what extent do you convert? And that was where it started on a whiteboard. Saying, okay, so essentially any leader on the planet only needs to address these two things. Need to think about how do I create frequency, time myself with the market, and how do I change my proposition, which is conversion. And that helped me. So, wow, okay, so now I'm getting it. These are only two things that you should do. And then I started building more formulas underneath. Okay, so what is behind conversion? And then I understood that behind conversion, you have natural relevance, and then you have capabilities. So the natural relevance of your product tied down with your capabilities being marketing efforts, sales skills, all these elements. Okay, great. So now I get the two elements that drives conversion. Now I need to understand frequency. That is essentially your go-to-market activities. So I went super methodic into this, and I said, okay, I need to formalize this so I can put this into a formula that helps me make decisions. And that I did at a very young age. And when I started to figure that out, it was very clear where the holes were in my model. One of the latest models that we developed pre-becoming establishing Nordic Alpha with the other guys was the natural relevance model, so the hyper transformation model called the BCSA model. And I actually worked a big part of my career actually not understanding natural relevance. People would say at business school, that's your value prop. No, it's not. Just saying value prop is a very, very basic way. I wanted to understand the underlying drivers of a value prop. And that's where the BCSA model came out.
Well, let me ask you, what have you found are some underlying drivers, at least in the area of tech?
Well, the thing is, and one of the things is, and you'll hear me talking a lot about this, essentially I believe that conventional business theories is destructive to transformation. So governance models, the way we manage companies, the way we set up board infrastructures actually is in no way compliant with the reality of hyper-transformation, hyper-growth.
Can you give me some principles or examples of these principles that are destructive?
Well, it's very basic. If you're running a company, let's say it's growing at 100%, and you have a classical board infrastructure meeting 4 times every year. So imagine what happens growth-wise between 2 board meetings.
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit. So, which means that you get the material 1 week before, and then you get a monthly report, and now you're going into a board meeting. It's going to be a completely different company. And if it's in hyper transformation or even in disruption, the challenging elements that this company has to deal with and the decisions the CEO and the management team needs to do over 3 months is insane. I always say that CEOs that are in that sweet spot of these 4 characteristics will have to make 200 decisions a week. And 196 of those, you don't have any data. And this is really what the book that I'm coming out with, the Nordic Alpha value creation model, is. It helps you actually not make perfect decisions, but make a lot of decisions with an above normal good outcome. This is really what you need in these kind of businesses. Conventional board infrastructures with governance structures is essentially, a lot of people have perceived this as a governing entity to control the company. But you can't control anything, but just the mere data, the mere decision making that happens between these things is completely disruptive to the logic of you having to govern anything. You're not governing anything. You're just, in reality, these companies is a rocket, and you just need to have some kind of control of this rocket, steer it. And that's a normal board infrastructure doesn't do that.
So how would you implement more agile framework around that for someone who's hypergrowth?
Yeah, so first of all, and sometimes I'm not too popular when I say this, a lot of people are getting board educations, and I said it's not worth a lot for these companies. The idea that sitting in a board because you're good at sitting in a board, go do that in a normal company. I always draw a flower to exemplify a board structure. Again, a company needed to find their board. And I said, if you take a conventional company, then the center of the flower is the generic board skills. And then you have tiny, tiny leaves on it. The leaves are the in-depth specialism of the board members. So this will work if you have a company where not a lot of things are happening and the board is a governance structure. But in hypergrowth, that flower has a tiny core. And then you need to have big leaves of specialism. So the way we're building boards in Nordic Alpha, the way I build boards around me previous to coming here, is really how can you actually bring specialism into the boardroom? Specialist areas. So bringing somebody in who understands, if it's GreenTech, then understand a CTO technical guy that can support the technical innovation. This person will, in between the board meetings, be close to the company, close to the CTO, maybe sparring, being a mentor, but being in that data stream. Then you have somebody who does global expansion and understands that, have done that 10 times or 5 times. Well, that's close to the CSO. And this is a sparring partner. And this way you tie the specialism into the operational reality of these companies, because these leaders within this company, they don't need governance. They need mentoring. They need support. They need ideas. They need experience. And that kind of structure is something we're trying to also build in all our companies here at Nordic Alpha, so they don't panic, because a conventional board will completely panic because the governance side is going to be completely out of control, because they're going to see a new company. They can't govern that. So this is a way of we do this on a governance side.
I'd love to hear, you talked about creating a value creation toolkit and seeing there's a big gap, or at least a big challenge within sustainability community. Talk to me about the frustration that you've experienced in regards to trying to hit a net zero carbon emissions goal and not properly going at it in the right way. I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, so I think there's several misconceptions around the green transformation, and I think now we're also talking pre-Nordic Alpha for me. So I think I can answer it in different ways, but one of the things that I found to be both intriguing and quite funny and also super strange is when I became the CEO of Microshade, which was a first generation GreenTech company. I remember journalists would say to me, oh, now you're the CEO of a GreenTech company. You're like, okay, so tell me, could you please send me the GreenTech customer list? So how can you take a whole industry that identifies itself based on a customer segment that doesn't exist? I think this was the big misconception, because nobody's looking for GreenTech. It's like, I sell GreenTech. What is that? So I think that was one of the things I said, wow, there's so much opportunity here, because you have a whole industry talking about an identity that it has that actually doesn't exist in reality. Just imagine if that whole industry started to think about, no, I'm a construction product, or I fit into the energy sector, and go in with a classical business model. So I think that's one thing. The other thing that what followed it is when I looked at many of the business models, they were green. So the big problem is when you have a company, especially now it's changing, but in the old days, Green was the CSR manager and he had no budget, lots of time. Business model was a CFO, lots of money, no time. And everybody was going in that direction. I think this was one of the biggest problems on the first cycle, is there was so much focus on being green, but nobody's buying green. So I think that was one element.
Why were they not buying green? Is it inefficient at the time?
Essentially, nobody's buying green. Still today. I think today there's much more marketing efforts, positioning, fear of regulatory things happening. End of the day, relying on your proposition for being green is super unhealthy. Yes, today a lot of things are moving politically in the right direction, but as I introed it, we don't consider ourselves as a sustainable impact fund. We consider us an economic sustainability fund, which is a completely different thing.
And I'd be very curious to hear you talk about the philosophy, the guiding philosophy behind that.
Yeah, sure. And again, also for listeners here, please go look up the article I had that European Business Review put in, I think October issue last year. It's online, and just Google economic sustainability in a time of impact and regulation. This was the article I introduced, the concept around it. What really puzzles me, we're talking about a transformation that needs to channel $150 trillion into it. And nobody's talking about the free market drivers. That is super strange. Economic sustainability is not a new term. It's a term that simply just says that you drive the green transformation based on the free market drivers. Essentially, it's a capitalistic approach to reaching net zero, or actually achieving sustainable impacts. And yes, you could argue that it's the capitalism that created the problem. I agree on that. But the whole philosophy of utilizing the market drivers to actually transform the world intrigues me a lot, and really is the core identity. The other thing under economic sustainability is even distribution of wealth, which is another thing that I like a lot. The idea that if you look at the software companies, for example, very few people get super rich. That's great, and good luck with that. But the great thing about when you look at GreenTech, and yes, we're gonna have GreenTech billionaires for sure, but the great thing about it's Hardtech. So you're gonna have truck drivers, people that does support, logistical people. You create so much job because those value chains are just hitting everybody in society. We did an investment in a company called Green Hydrogen Systems in Fund 1. We took it public, one of the largest IPOs in Denmark, or the largest IPO in Denmark last 5 years. We came in, there were 10 people. We IPO'd 7 quarters later, 175. Now, 3.5 years later, there are 350 employees. That is the same as Unity, which is a 5 or 7 times unicorn coming out of Denmark. That's the same amount of employees that they have in Denmark today. And we're just getting started with this company. And nothing wrong, massive respect to Unity and their guys. It's just putting in context that when you see what you can do in GreenTech, but also the impact on the even distribution of wealth and how you create healthy distribution of jobs is I think two very positive sides. So let's come back to the philosophy. So the philosophy that we have is that when you're in the early stage investors, and there are hundreds of those you probably looked into, there's a new early stage GreenTech investor coming out every week now or every month. A lot of, very few growth funds, very lot of early stage funds. And that's great. These are the guys that go out and spot out the engineers that have the technology and things like that. As such, their dependency on regulatory dynamics and politics is great, because that really is paving the way or creating fundamental structures to give them subsidies as they're getting their product into the market. When you go to the growth phase, you can't be reliant on these things. If you're reliant on regulatory dynamics, subsidies, when you're building 50 factories globally, that's an outside factor. So the way we look at it at Nordic Alpha, and also the philosophy, is that economic sustainability is great because it drives a transformation that actually makes us richer. On the other side, you have to do that because you cannot bet in the maturity phase on political changes, and they will happen all the time. So what we really try to do at Nordic Alpha is how to spot the dynamics of the winners that can drive this transformation without being dependent on these things. And yes, if we can get carbon credits, if we can get subsidies, we'll do it, we'll take it. But we will never build business cases on this. I promise you here, if you see us doing carbon capture based on carbon credits, you call me. I don't think we'll do this for a while because this is an artificial created environment. And it's great, we need it because we cannot rely on the market like we do. You need many other things to drive into this. But I think our role as an investor is more valuable in actually building real businesses.
Yeah. So you have what you would say is a frustration in the approach and not really taking the analytics, the data into consideration. And you guys are taking a different approach. You're working with hypergrowth companies and scaling them up, and in turn, not only creating jobs, but also working towards sustainability efforts. Is that right?
Yeah, but it's all our companies have only, again, they're all GreenTech companies, but we would never position them as GreenTech.
Right, because of the value creation process.
Exactly.
Right. So I'd love to hear that. Like, what frustrates you about that whole conversation, and why?
So I just think that I don't know if it frustrates me. I think we're missing language. I think that's my whole point. It's like nobody understands the difference in value on building a company that can take away. And let's take Rematch. Rematch is a Fund 1 investment. They developed a process where they can recycle artificial turf. And then people always say here in Denmark, is that a big industry? Well, the complete waste out of the wind turbine industry every year is 66,000 tons. The waste stream out of the artificial turf industry, purely in sports, is 15 million tons. If you incinerate that, that is more emission than Denmark emits on CO2. So it's a massive waste stream. And this company can set up a factory that can take this waste stream at the same cost of incineration and then get 90% pure output that you can sell as valuable products, creating 45 jobs every single factory. And you can put up 220 factories worldwide. And they will generate profit. They will create enormous amount of jobs. This is fantastic. Nobody in the press, the media, politicians sees the difference of this company versus a company that pumps CO2 into the ground, and do that because they do get carbon credits, an artificial created environment. And I say, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. My point is, this is a company that does this, does 3 to 5 million euros of revenue or profits per factory, hires 45 people and fixing a massive problem. Don't need subsidies, doesn't need regulatory dynamics. And I think this is something that I find super strange, is why we're not able to favor these technology companies. And we get a new language saying, we start with economic sustainability. And we're done with economic sustainability, then we look at carbon credits, then we look at other elements, because those are super ineffective. Alone in Europe, we need to spend 24 billion or trillion euros to get to net zero. Half of those doesn't have a positive business case. So that means you need to channel 12 trillion euros from something else. That is bridging, that is education, that is lots of things out there. And if you just move the needle 1%, just think about that so it becomes a positive business case. That allows a lot of capital for us to invest into other infrastructure that the world is needing right now. So that's, I think, where the frustration is, that you're missing language around this.
Yeah. As someone who runs a production company, one of my goals is to help people communicate their vision and position themselves properly in the market. I'd love for you to talk about your process. Say I was a tech entrepreneur and you were to look at the portfolio of my company and look at it. How would you go about the process of positioning it from maybe what it was in the past towards an even better product, so that it's positioned properly for growth and hypergrowth?
Yeah, so first of all, I think maybe I want to talk about the BCSA model first, one of the key models, because that is what we're looking for first. BCSA stands for better, cheaper, simpler, and available. It was a model that was created at Microshade because I couldn't understand why by far the most revolutionary technology on the planet for construction was almost impossible to get through the value chain of the construction industry. So for the end user, for a property owner, the value is insane. There's not a single factor in the building is not improved. We're talking 30, 35 factors, from energy consumption to square meter effectiveness to energy dependency to simplicity to maintenance. Everything, this product is just better because it takes out the energy coming through the facade without taking out the light. So I wanted to understand what actually moves through the value chain. And this is where I realized that first of all, and this is also the misconception that we see in many companies, never think about the end of the value chain. Think about where you are in the value chain. First of all, where are you selling? That's the only the only important decision maker when you build your strategy. Who's in front of you? They need to adopt it first. There might be a value at the end, but that's where you need to go. So what I learned is that if you go to the business school, they will say, oh, it's your value prop. And then you look at your value prop. So it just needs to, what is the value to the customer? And what is the financial outcome? Is it cheaper or is it a better business for them? So the BC. And that's great if you're buying a PC where you know where to go, you know exactly what to expect. You'll buy the one that has the best performance for you at the best price. When you're talking transformative technologies or new technologies, you're forgetting the adoption level. And that's the SNA, the simple and available. So you need to go into a value chain with a new technology that is different what you did. Being BC is not at all enough. You need to also be as simple to adopt, and you need to be available in a large scale. And I think this is the biggest challenge with GreenTech. People are forgetting the S and the A. I like to use the example of a corporate where you're selling into a corporate and saying, listen, I have this proposition, and yes, it's 10 times as good, and it costs half. All you need to do is change your ERP system, and then we're going. It's never going to happen. Or my first global deal, which was to BMW, 50 million year contract many years ago, they just looked and said, it's great, same SLA in 78 countries. So we don't do multiple service level agreements. So either you fulfill this globally or we're not in business. That's the A. And I think we look as an investor for these four characteristics. And if they're there, you are going to be paid to be the global winner of your transformation. All big transformational winners, people that have changed the world, has been those four things.
Yeah. So can you summarize those four things?
Better, cheaper. So is this better for me? So that's purely the business case. So is this, and for many green tech companies, it's doing something just being green. But if it's doing something they do today, but it's not, but it's green, people will choose it. But if it's twice the cost, forget it. It's not going to happen. Simpler? Well, if you're not able to adopt it, maybe use one of our investment examples. We recently sold a company to Elon Musk, Tesla, to the EV side. I'm not allowed to talk too much about it, but I can talk about the journey. This is some of the brightest guys within power electronics in the world. Four bright guys coming out of Fraunhofer Institute. Fraunhofer is more or less the MIT of Europe, big German institute, and very strong on power electronics. And these guys, they started a company and figured out how to stabilize inductive charging, wireless charging. And when they came out, they started the company. When they pitched this to us saying, okay, this is great, wireless charging for robots, no brainer. The alternative robot is the switch, or so if you can do this wireless while it's in operation, obviously. It had the same effectiveness as a cable, no brainer. It was twice the price. But then they said, don't worry. At IKEA, they can save 30% of the robots. At BMW, they can save 30% of the robots. Yes, but you're not selling to IKEA. You're selling to Mia, to a robot company. So having twice the cost there was a big problem for us. Simpler, the entity was larger. So just integrating it and the process of integration was different. And then finally available, that internal production, things like that. So even though the company only did 400K euro when we came in, we said we need to BCS8. So we said you need to get to a cost level of a cable. I don't care about IKEA because we need to get it into a robot before it gets to IKEA, because that's where you are in the value chain. So we did a redesign of the product. The company did a redesign of the product, actually getting it to a size that would allow it to easily integrate into the robot, so you didn't have to add more space. They put up a rapid design-in program, allowing them to really go support the integration so it would not be difficult for the ones designing it in. We outsourced the production, so you actually could deliver the volumes. And suddenly, you can go into the value chain saying, okay, I can do wireless charging, same cost as a cable, as easy to integrate, and available in scale. Boom. This year, they were just sold now. They would have done 40 million euros, and that is in 4 years. So enormous scaling. They are now in 33 countries. They have been adopted. I can't talk names, but almost all German automotive companies have integrated this into the factories, into the robots, all the big logistical companies as well, because it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And and this I think is a very good example then that these 4 engineers being super skilled, fixing a big problem, making that BCSA, and then instant adoption. And of course, Elon is coming in now, and he will, of course, now take out that pioneering positioning and bring that into EVs. So of course, it'll be very strange not to assume that we're very soon going to see a Tesla with wireless charging inside of it.
Well, that's a question for you. Are you able to actually talk about the different value propositions before and after? Maybe you can make a generalized example, but I thought how you guys had transformed that value proposition was actually pretty brilliant.
Yeah, and again, also you said your question before about corporate identity. One of the things is if you're BCSA, you'll win the transformation. So what we try to, in the workshops we do pre-investment with the company is saying, okay, so what is really the biggest challenge with electrification of the world? The electrical engine has been superior of the fossil engine for 30 years. So why are we not all driving EVs? Why are we not just fully adopting electrical infrastructures? Yeah, the instant question, because batteries are not good enough. Again, that's a misconception because the batteries are just means to an end. Imagine energy could just flow automatically into electrical infrastructures. So the key to electrification of the world is wireless charging. The key to us driving EVs is when it's in the road. Because if you had a Tesla, by the way, faster than any Lamborghini, and you can charge while you're driving, and by the way, have half the size of lithium batteries, and that's the other side effect. Nobody would ever buy a fossil fuel car. So what we try to do with the company is saying, okay, this is essentially the key to electrification of the world. So we changed the identity of the company to be the enabler of the electrification of the world.
Yeah, rather than just providing some sort of
wireless charging.
Yeah,
wireless charging versus the enabler of the electrified economy. So this identity change is what we try to do in all our assets. Yeah. We try to say, okay, what is the end game of the transformation that you are fueling with your technology? And of course, this is why we have a pre-investment strategy process with the companies. So saying, first, we need to find out, can there be BCSA? Secondly, can we find cost effectiveness in scaling this globally? Do they have the right skills? Can we support them on that? And then obviously, okay, so assuming with Ethereum, even though they did 400K the year before, we say, we know they're going to be the global leader. So we knew they were going to be BCSA. So what we then try to design out is the different positioning this company can take through its journey. So we try to develop multiple strategies at the same time. So what we realized is if they really can come out, they very quickly will be the category leader, the global leader within this. So we said already in the strategy process, okay, when that happens, we actually move to the next phase, which we call the dominance diamond. So when you're category leader, BCSA, then the next phase is the dominance diamond. So that's actually taking that position and pivoting that into the dominant asset in an industry or in a transformation. And for us, that meant converting the business, pivoting it to a services play. So so today selling to a Daimler factory or an automotive factory, you're in robot number 7 and 5 maybe. But that means somebody else could be coming into robot number 3. So the idea of what we did is, okay, so what if we take that leader position and just move the proposition saying wireless energy as a service? So we started even in the strategy process building a software platform that would enable us to pivot the business. And we're investing heavily into this. And we are at the first large POCs actually on this strategy. So that would have been the next phase of value peaking for us. As an investor, we have the opportunity to opt out. So one of the key things about GreenTech investment is you need to build these windows of opportunities to get out. So we realized that was not without risk pivoting the company, and that's why we actually started a strategy or an exit process to test if there's viability of the current value peak, if we could get the kind of the return that we're looking for, and that happened. We had also designed the fourth phase, which was pivoting into EVs. So we knew that the first play was industrial, going into robots and forklifts, but eventually we knew EVs would come over and be the next cycle. But we also knew that would probably be a standardization play. So the play we had to fuel there was that we had to become the standard for EV. So the company tried to see what are actually the forums where these standards would come out and actually managed to position themselves super in the core of the German standardization forum and also the industrial one that the industry was doing, the supply industry to the EV industry. So Elon coming in now got access to these two tables. And it was based on that eventually, of course, the full potential of wireless charging will not be industrial only. It will be going into EVs. This is all things we design in the strategy process. The identity of the company change is something we design in the strategy process and start communicating.
Yeah. So if I'm looking at sort of implementing some of your principles, what are the kind of questions I should be asking myself in terms of actually providing a strategy for value creation within my company?
So I would always look at frequency times conversion. So where it all started.
Right. Yeah, from the beginning.
All the way from the beginning, saying these are the only two factors that drive your business. So should you increase your frequency or should you increase your conversion? So I would go in and again, we have an engine called the BTM Business Traction Management. This is an AI engine that actually looks at all the correlating factors that actually can identify where to put your efforts. It's very complex, but it actually allows you to look at what are the conversion ratios and what parts of your frequency activities drives the best conversion ratio. So that can be a market intelligence side. At the same time, also testing propositions on the conversion sides against competitors or changing your pricing and see, okay, that changes my conversion. So what I would tell companies is start mapping out the future in the sense that when you talk to 100 customers, how many of those do you convert? And then the question is, okay, so what is more effective for me to invest in increasing my conversion by improving my natural relevance of my product? I need to make it more attractive. Or on the other side, do I need to talk to 200-300 customers? That's the kind of decisions you need to make. And I can give you some rules of thumb, is that if you are a Hardtech value selling, so you sell like by Furhtermore or you sell 3D print solutions, if you're winning around 1/3 of qualified leads, that's an average for an industry. If you're doing more than that, well, then invest in frequency. If you're doing less, look at your conversion, your proposition. So a pure mature company like HP, Cisco, like established companies like that with a value sell, and here I'm not talking online businesses and things like that, but really where you have meetings with a customer trying to sell them a Hardtech value proposition, 33 is your rule of thumb. Yeah. So higher than that, invest in execution because you're doing well. Lower, look at your proposition.
Yeah. Last question. Before I ask you about the book and introduce it for the end. But I'd love to hear, as you know, you've worked with many different company owners in the past. I'd love to hear your thoughts on branding in regards to, you said you work on actually changing the identity of the company. How much of the company is tied to the people that run it?
Well, initially a lot.
Yeah.
Initially a lot, but you need to be careful about selling people. So a big part of the strategy cycles we go to is actually removing, and it's not in a negative sense. It's purely value sense, because if
availability.
Yeah, exactly. If too much of the value is tied down with a founder, it's very risky. You're not going to get a high multiple. So you need to ensure what you're selling is a company that actually contains the value of your buying across the company. What we do, because our companies grow so enormously fast, they're typically 8, 10 to 20 people when we get in, and they will be more than 100. So most of our assets grow with 1,000% the first year and a half, 2 years. That means you're going through three cultural cycles. So you're going from, yes, we do everything, and we sit together in the same and eat lunch, to, oh, I have a professional management, to I lead to the middle level. Denmark here, where we're doing this recording, is really, really bad at the third cycle. That's why you have so many mid-sized companies in Denmark, because they fail to put the execution capability and the leadership into the central part of the management cycle, so leading through the middle level. But we try, when we go in, even though we're 8, 10 people, to set up that strong middle management immediately.
From the outset of?
Yes, the offset.
Okay.
So, and because you're going to be 1.5 years, 2 years out anyway. So you might as well start to scale yourself towards that. And obviously there'll be certain profiles that is more needed. That can be operational capabilities or sales capabilities where you need to go first. So it's not like we set up here two founders and we put a full management team underneath them. We don't do that. We try to tailor out what are the most important to the challenges of the company, but we try to really think, how do we build strong middle management? Because if you do that, then you can really build a business from 100 to 500 people, if you do that. If you don't do that, you're going to be lacking in efficiency on your scaling of the company at 100 people. Either because the CEO will not be able to manage the organization anymore, because you can't do that around the table at lunch and you know everybody. So you need to put that down. So we try to really front load that capability level very early.
Yeah.
So I think that's from a scaling point, very, very important and skill point.
Tell me about the book that you are going to be releasing, and who's it for, and what tool sets are they going to get from reading it?
Yeah, so the book is, so first of all, the book was developed through my career, and it's the models in there that we have incorporated into Nordic Alpha. So if you look at the value creation model of Nordic Alpha, it's on one side, it is these models that we use to understand the business, to scale the business, and on the other side is how we're organized, really with our processes, the people, the way we always have a value creation profile, really leading the strategy development and being very close to the CEO. So like weekly, close to, and some of my business daily, to be in the data stream. So what we're trying to do with the book is we want to help more people. The green transformation is lacking the skills. And of course, for us, Rasmus, Troels, and me, we're very passionate about the green transformation. But we're also realizing that the skill set is not out there. So we're actually doing several things. On one side, coming up with a book that helps people to get a language around these challenges. But when you have the language, actually also understand the models that allows them to make a lot of decisions with a above normal good outcome. And then thirdly, also all the management tools, allowing them to steer the business. But it won't tell you about how to set up your board. It's not going to tell you how to do green financing. These things are not inside it. It's a theoretical, methodical, operational book. And it's for investors. It's for board members that want to manage the highly dynamic business or understand those realities. And then finally, of course, founders that are going through this journey. It will tell you how to value peak your company. It will tell you how to change your identity. It will change you how to really focus your efforts in order to make the most value now. Unlike the books that I was lacking, the books that I was lacking at time, it will do it data-driven. So you can put numbers through this. You can put actually predictive elements into this. And I think this is a book that I hope can inspire a lot of people. So that's the idea. What we're already doing also, we're working already with the educational institution. So we have a partnership with Copenhagen Business School and also with the Danish Technology University in order to actually get these theories integrated into the entrepreneurial lines. And we're also debating on actually setting up an education specific for these three categories of people who really want to endeavor into, well, it doesn't have to be green tech, but of course, my ambition is to educate these ES warriors, economic sustainability warriors. So the more we can get people out with these skills, the more we can adopt. And again, we hired 600 people the last 3 years. So we need a lot of these profiles out there that have these capabilities. So of course, this is more of a tangible approach to actually taking the book and making it more operational. Those educations will have governance. They will have green financing. They will have elements of organizational theory on how to actually go through multiple cultural transformation steps. So there will be more meat to the bone there.
So let's say someone listening to this is extremely passionate about the environment. They're in that stage where they're like, they would like to get in touch with you and follow along with what you guys are doing. How do they do that?
So first of all, go follow Nordic Alpha Partners on one side. And the other thing is we also have what we call an ES Warrior LinkedIn profile. So economic sustainability warriors. This is really tailored towards people that want to endeavor into this. It's a communication. It's not very active because it will very much be more the generic ideas and philosophies on how to actually drive the green transformation. So it's not Nordic Alpha. It is more of a community on the outside to do this. I'll go follow these two entities. Also look at the article that I got that was in European Business Review here in July. Which is called, I don't recall right now, it's called Net Zero Requires an Army of Economic Sustainability Warriors. So just Google European Business Review and ES Warriors and it'll pop up. It talks about the math around it. And maybe just a final remark on that. When you have these leaders, and what I talk about is typically only takes 5 people to really drive and lead the transformation of a company. 5 ES Warriors. So C-level people, a visionary founder, and maybe a chairman that really commits into it. It only requires 5 people. 5 people can initiate this. 5 people can build a company of 1,000 people. If you look at just the 5 investments I did on Nordic Alpha Fund 1, the impact of those actually already now, one single person offsets 14,000 people. 14,000 people on the pure impact they've done. Nordic Alpha now will hit 1 million tons of CO2 that we abated with the transformations that we drove forward. You can go to our website, NA Partners, you can see the mathematics and also the underlying thing. Denmark needs 700 ES Warriors, with the average contribution of one of the 5 executives in one of the 5 investments that I've done, Denmark will be net zero. If we want to hit the same kind of impact by going vegan, all of Scandinavia have to go vegan. And I think it's just more realistic to educate 100 talents into 2 Danish institutions every year. 100 talents, and in 7 years, Denmark will be net zero. And we'll do that while we created 15, 30, 100,000 jobs. This is the power of economic sustainability. And what I think that we can be proud of here at Nordic Alpha is we thought this vision, we went to execute it, and the numbers are so crazy. And that's also why we're spending the time on actually trying to educate, because the route to net zero comes from ES Warriors. It comes from tech transformation. It comes to doing this on the free market drivers. There's not a chance we'll reach this by forcing us not to eat meat. It's not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is we'll have 3 billion middle-class people coming into the world next 20 years. And the only thing they're thinking about is ribeyes, iPhones, and Teslas. And that's the problem. So even we have 30 million Nordic people that all decide to go vegan or save themselves, so that's not going to matter. So we need to have tech transformation. We need to change our way of working. And it needs to be based on economic sustainability, because we simply do not have the financing globally to subsidize or regulate ourselves to this. It will create too much ineffectiveness. Mm-hmm. So I think go follow these things. Buy the book. But again, the book is also more generic, but it actually is just incredibly well suited to managing these 4 transformational elements, or these hyperdynamics of disruption, transformation, hypergrowth, and Hardtech. That's where that's a lot of value. But you can read the book. You will have as much benefit if you're in software, or if you're in IT, Hardtech, or if you're in anything else. It's the same basic logics. There are no green tech specialism around this. It just makes more sense because of the complexity of green tech.
Well, Laurits, thank you. I think for me, obviously, I'm not within the tech industry in that regard. I do productions, but one of the things that really makes me think about is how scalable is the company that I run, and asking me, is it a no-brain solution where it just makes sense, it can be incorporated, and there's a lot of big things to make me even think about just how I run my company and company philosophy behind it. So thank you.
Yeah, and maybe just on that, maybe one final inspiration to people is that, remember, conversion consists of 2 things: the natural relevance of your product and capability. The one that's super difficult to scale is capability. So if you have low natural relevance, you need a lot of capability to make a conversion. A lot of people very much have a misconception around it. Oh no, we need to make, let's say, 60% gross profit of what we do. Yeah, but in order to do that, you need to spend so much money on doing capability stuff to do that. So maybe if you have a natural relevance, means that your conversion is actually 75%, but you're making only 30% gross profit. Then you have 0 capability, and the cost is typically there. Mm. So what I always tell to people, stop thinking about the net GP. Makes no sense. It is this cost of execution divided by the GP. So GP divided by cost of execution. That's the formula. So how much do you get value out of the cost of actually shutting down the deal? And here, sometimes you'll see natural relevance. Increasing that is way more important than actually focusing on increasing my capabilities to secure the sale, because that is expensive, that is complex, that takes long term.